And when I say evil, because it just doesn't stop there, it just doesn't stop with being docile. But just to be able to really embrace the understanding that certain positive strength character traits or personality traits have been weeded out of black folks, to where what we have today are black folks that are just happy, we just sit at the lunch counter, happy we just going to school, and living in the neighborhood and all that stuff, which is fine. Because I have children, I want them to be well, I want them to be educated, and I want them to live, and I understand that. But as I walk through the neighborhoods every day, in the inner cities, and I see a lot of the issues and a lot of the problems that we have, I can't help but believing that all the issues, all the negative that we see are related to that situation we've just described. So it's not simply being docile and cooperative, it's all the other negative traits that accompany that docility. For example, we understand then how that warrior psyche, that warrior mindset was weeded out of black folks to what we have today. So then think about it. Just think about a warrior. Think about a strong, say, African warrior. What does that entail? What does a warrior do? What does a warrior do for himself? What does a warrior do for his family? A warrior takes care of himself, keeps himself healthy, and strong. He can hunt, he can kill, he can take care of business, and that's as it pertains to himself. And as well, he can take care of his family. He can protect his family. He can nurture his family. He can make sure everything is all right. The food is there. The comforts of life are there. The shelter is there. And if someone attacks the family, he's there to protect them. If an animal or a creature or any kind of stranger comes, he's there to protect the family. That's his job. So now what happens when that warrior psyche is taken out of this man? Then what is he? Then what's the opposite of that warrior? He's no longer taking care of himself. He's no longer taking care of his body. He's no longer doing whatever is best for himself and his body. He's no longer at home protecting his family, caring for his family, nurturing his family, making sure they have shelter, making sure they have food, making sure that if someone or a stranger or something attacks him, he's there to protect them. It's not that. He's not there anymore, because that warrior trait as well has been weeded out of the African man. And so what do we see in our neighborhoods? And he said, well, I'm not poor, I don't live in the inner city, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but are some of those traits in you right now? Are we really nurturing our families? Are we just a paycheck? Are we protecting our families? Are we doing what's best for our bodies and our health? Are we taking care of our wives, or are we playing around or staying out and doing things? See, these are the things that what I'm suggesting is that what's happened over all these years have had a tremendous negative effect on the African American, and we don't even realize it. We look in our neighborhoods and we look at the failings in our lives, and even of those of us that are successful, how we respond to our families even. And now, it's not everyone, of course. That would be ridiculous to say. And I'm not even saying that trait is no longer there. I'm looking at it sort of like a dominant and recessive. You know how we look at genes? I'm looking at those personality traits. They're there. They're just recessive. And so we see how it deals with the warrior. When the warrior is taken away. So how would it deal with the woman? How would it deal with the African woman, or the descendants of that African woman, the African American woman we have today? Well, when the warrior is no longer there, he's not taking care of himself. He's subjugated to all kinds of ills and humiliation by the slave owners. Now there was a lot of sympathy and caring, I'm sure, in that first generation of African woman to her man who was being humiliated and abused so. And the women weren't the only ones being molested and raped, I think we know. So this is being viewed by the African woman who's expecting her warrior to be all those things that a warrior is. And so she is heartbroken, that first generation. But then the kids come up and recognize that. Now, those kids were not in Africa. Those kids didn't see a warrior. All they see is, this is what daddy is. This is what happens to black men. And there is a generation that has never seen a warrior. And the warriors that they do see still coming in with that steady flow from Africa are being taken care of quickly by the slave owners. So then, given more generations and more generations, how does the African woman begin viewing, or how does the African American woman begin viewing this black man who is no longer a warrior, who's being humiliated, who's being abused, that can't stand up or take up for himself, that isn't able to take care of the family, that isn't able to protect her kids, that isn't able to provide shelter, even protect her from the enemy, the midnight, visitations from the master while his wife is asleep. So you're talking about 400 years of no protection from the black man. And having to fend for herself, having to fight off the master for herself, having to protect her kids for herself, sometimes sacrificing her own life for her kids because that African man isn't there or isn't able to do so. So what do you have today? So what are the descendants of that? How is the evolution of that? We understand the evolution or maybe de-evolution of the warrior psyche, but what about that African woman? What is her mindset? How has her mind evolved in her relationship and her attitude into how she views the black man? You've had a lot of contemptuous black women that are contemptuous, that are about the black man, that don't trust the black man, that believe that they're the ones that have to make the decisions. They're the ones that have to protect. They're the ones that have to provide shelter. They're the ones that have to provide food. And so they have evolved. And what's really pitiful about that picture is we have become these things that we were not, these things that we are not. Because the black woman does have to do those things too many times because the black man isn't there. We complain because of the amount of child support that has to be paid, but they're your children. And so then there's the battle that ensues, and then she gets blamed because she wants this, and he gets blamed. But there's an old saying, an old Buddhist saying that if you look at the children and you follow the children back to the mother. And I'm using that to sort of symbolize when you look at the manifestations of the ills of our lives, instead of blaming each other, follow those manifestations back to the source. And that's the source that we're discussing today, why we are this way. Where was the warrior mentality that the proud black man had? Where is the comfort that the proud black woman was able to take in recognizing that her proud warrior man was taking care of her? It's all been destroyed. It's all been dismantled. Now again, I don't believe, and many will disagree with me, that I don't believe it was intentional. I don't believe the slave owners were that bright. This was just a result of those things that happened. That's why we have a very unique situation with African Americans today. Because we are docile. We don't hold grudges because we've been conditioned. And those that would hold grudges, those that would have a big problem, those that would fight back or protest, or even be stronger about taking care of themselves, stronger about protecting and taking care of their families, stronger about all these moral things, well, they're gone. And what I would suggest today, it's very unique to the African American because you're talking about people that were slaves for so long. You're talking about people that were slaves for like almost 300 years in this nation. And then struggled just trying to get human rights, freedom rights, civil rights in this nation. And even still suffer today through racism and discrimination and which has to be enforced by law. Okay? And so these mindsets can't hardly simply be changed. It's very difficult. And that's why we're suffering so. Sounds pretty dismal, doesn't it? But then you take white folks as well, because they've been here as well all along this journey. And for so long they were the oppressors. We wonder why today that white folks have these attitudes, about black folks. And we know they do. We know the jokes we happen to overhear. We know the talks that go around the dinner table in their own homes. I was speaking to an old friend of mine, grew up with a preacher, a pastor, a minister. And he was, and I told him, I think racism must be a sin. And he was like, I was talking about the people that talk about things, and I knew his family. We were raised together in junior high school. And man, I didn't know I was hitting the nerve that deep that it was his family that was talking like that. And his face turned red. He was like, I don't believe racism is a sin. But whether it is or not, that spoke volumes to me. And even this guy, not this guy. So I mean, this stuff. So this goes on today in homes, in households, when people are in their little groups. You know, white folks talking about black folks, and you see in the workplace as well. And what's very unfortunate is they can get away with it in the workplace because we, as well, as a result of our ills, are living up to those stereotypes. Those stereotypes are based on something we're not doing right. We're trying to get over, which is what people do. We're doing all kinds of things we shouldn't be doing as a result of that warrior psyche being removed, or at least repressed and now recessive within us. That it's easy for them to get over on us because we're not really doing right. We look at the prisons today, and I see a lot of African Americans, intellectual African Americans, are complaining about the number of black folks in prison compared to the number of white folks. And the reason, you know, as you look back and do some research, is because black people are getting heavier charges for the same crimes. Well, that is true, but for me, then, black folks need to be in a place where we recognize we need to stop doing crimes. Because the reality is you're not going to get folks to do right. And the reason you're not going to get them to do right is because they're suffering from the same ills we are. Their ancestors were part of a particular process. Now, they were the oppressive parts of the process. They were the antagonists of the process. But generations and generations of folks born into a place that believed that they were superior to black folks. I mean, you might say, well, you know they're not superior. I'm smarter than that white guy is. But you're talking about 400 years of conditioning to generations and generations, just as the conditioning that we have gone through. So when you look at somebody like a white friend of yours, that's a good friend of yours, if you're able to be a fly on the wall in their home, in their living room, and it was just them, you would be amazed at some of the things that were discussed at that dinner table. Because just as we are victims to the 400 years of ills and issues and evolution of the psyche, so are they. And so what I'm suggesting today is we first need to be aware of this. And so my wife was telling me, I was expressing to her, she said, well, what are you going to do about it? What can we do? What's the answer? The answer is the light bulb. We need to see this first. We need to understand. We need to recognize there is this issue. It's like cigarettes, for example. I used to smoke 2.5 packs of cigarettes a day. Many people have. So many smokers. So to the smokers out there, to the ex-smokers out there, how many times did you quit? I must have quit maybe 20 times. But I always started back again. But I don't smoke now. And some of you don't smoke now. Some of you are trying to quit. And you've quit many times just to pick it back up again. But that's okay. I don't want to focus really on the failure. I want to focus on why did you quit, or why did you decide to quit? Why do you want to quit smoking? And for me then, it's the same as for you. There was a point to where I enjoyed smoking. It was very important to me. It was such enjoyment, such peace out of it. But then there was a day that I realized that it was not good for me. So really when you think about it, well, I decided it really wasn't good for me. But if you really think about it, there was a moment, there was a transition, a point in time where you enjoyed smoking and you liked smoking and you were going to continue smoking. And then there was that moment in time where you determined you weren't going to smoke anymore. And whether you failed or succeeded, that's not the issue. What I want you to focus on is at that moment, that point in time where you realize the light bulb went off, that this isn't good for me, I don't want to do this. And that's what I'm talking about now. That's what we as African Americans and as Caucasians as well. We just need to come to a point where we realize this is why we are the way we are. This isn't right. See, the problem, even in the civil rights movement in America, it was always about civil rights. It was always about civil rights. You wanted to have the same rights as the people that you were living with. But it's above that. When we're looking at this thing, it's almost like not a spiritual issue, but it's a deeper issue than simply the laws of civility and fairness. It's about freedom. It's about human rights, and it's about something we all need. No matter what side of the spectrum that we fall on, the light bulb has to go off and recognize that this isn't right. The lifestyle that I'm living isn't right. The self-sabotage that I'm perpetrating upon myself isn't right. The sabotage that I'm perpetrating on those that I'm supposed to be protecting. The sabotage that I'm perpetrating on those I'm supposed to be nurturing and taking care of and providing for. Not just for their physical needs, but especially their physical needs as well, but as well their emotional needs, their psychological needs. We're just not that. I've learned that in the lives of my children. I have 3. I was not there for one of them, and I was halfway there for the next one, and now I have a 6-year-old daughter that I learned through this process, that I have evolved even in this way, and I'm there all the time. And I think, man, what if I had been like this all along? I mean, you can't make up. You could try, but what's done is done. What I'm suggesting now is a light bulb has to go off. I say this all the time, we have to find a way to step outside of ourselves and look at ourselves and ask ourselves, is this the way it's supposed to be? Something as simple as smoking a cigarette. Why am I doing this? Why am I taking something that I know causes death, causes cancer, causes other kinds of ills, and I am taking it into my body? And why am I finding pleasure in something that is not good for me? There's something wrong up here. And it's exactly what we're talking about today. We've been conditioned over years and years, centuries, to be in a place where we're doing things that we shouldn't be doing. Why am I not protecting my family? Why am I cheating on the mother of my children? Why am I doing these things? And you know, if I had a title for this particular talk, for this lecture, I would say, why are you the way you are? And are you what you think you are? Man, what I'm saying is the maze into this thing goes so far back. We're not the people that we were created to be. We're not the people that we're supposed to be. We are victims, all of us. And this is not necessarily an economic thing, but it's unfortunate when these issues do manifest in our lives in a very negative way. This is for all of us, and I believe we all need to do some soul searching, because we need to be well. We need to be well. We wonder why sometimes we pass ills down onto our children, and it's because the ills that are manifested in our life, we just don't realize it. We wonder why our children are so spoiled, why they have to have now, and they go tantrums if they don't get what they want right now. But then we look at our lives closely, and we have to have what we want right now, and they're just little images of us. They're picking up our traits. What I'm suggesting today is that we just need right now for a light bulb to go off, to realize this reality, the mutations of the cockroach, the same as the mutations in our psyche. And the warrior psyche, the warrior mentality has been suppressed, repressed, and is recessive in our lives. As well, that woman that can respect the warrior African male has been suppressed, repressed, and is recessive as well. This is not the way that it's supposed to be. Black men, you're supposed to be honored. Black women should be able to trust that honor in that black man. But we don't have any of that. We're kind of jacked up. But this light bulb going off right now just to recognize. So I'm not saying everybody's going to be successful immediately. But we can be better than we are. I haven't smoked a cigarette in 20 years. I don't even desire one. There are other things about my life and my lifestyle, that I have changed. You can change. But it takes a light bulb going off. This is not the way it's supposed to be. This is not good for me. I will not go this way anymore. And you might slip up and fail, but recognize, no, I'm not. I slipped up and failed, but I'm not going to act ways that this is the way I am, because it's not. And eventually, many of those negative traits will begin to disappear. Because what I'm believing, when I talk about recessive, like genes, being recessive and dominant, I'm looking at the same way with these traits that are passed down into our families. I don't believe that African warrior trait was destroyed. I believe that it's just gone recessive and that it's within us. And given the right set of circumstances, the right nurturing, it will pop up. And we need to consider that. We need to work on that. We need to come together, even as African Americans, and just encourage each other, recognizing and never justifying. What we do too often is justify our wills. It's that person's fault, it's this person's fault, or this ain't too bad, this isn't too bad, but it's all bad. Most of the stuff we do is not good. Look at the number. Come on now. I mean, I understand the hope and the possibility, the amount of times you've won, but come on. You think whatever entity is responsible for producing this thing before us to play the number, do you think if they weren't getting over big time, they would continue the number? No. But it's a lucrative business to them. Why? Because they're playing on the addictions, the ills of so many people. Recognize that. Recognize the cigarette industry. They should have been put out of business a long time ago. Alcohol as well. And you're saying, well, this is unbelievable. It's not even impossible. It is possible. That light bulb needs to go off. We have to recognize that we've been jacked up for so long, we don't even realize who we're supposed to be or what we're supposed to be doing, and we've justified the negative ills and the negative acts in our lives by either saying, oh, it's not too bad, somebody's worse, or just blaming our ills on somebody else. There's nobody to blame. Now you can take that analogy I gave you and we'll blame it on the white folks or the white slave owners, but those people are dead. Nobody's going to get you out of this but you. It's time. And it's possible. For real. I'm going to have to pick up on this another time and just try to think of ways out of this. But the first thing is that light bulb going off. We have to recognize this is reality. This is why we're here. The positive traits have been sort of mutated out of us, but they're still there. They're just recessive. And the dominant traits that we have are the destructive traits, the traits that aren't really morally good for us or our families or for society. I'm telling you, the quicker and the sooner, hopefully if we could all get this thing together, all people, not just black folks, but if all people could get this together and recognize that a lot of what we are about, of what we think or what we think is right, if we just examine it closely, we know it isn't right. Come on, the politics recently, that should have shown us something. We know truth. That's why sometimes it's hard to argue politics with someone on the other side, whichever the other side is, whatever side you're on, the other side. Because you're arguing with someone who probably knows that what you're saying is true. But it just doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Why can we embrace something that we know is not true? Why can we embrace something that is harmful to someone else as long as it's beneficial to me? Because we're just as jacked up as everybody else is. Let that light bulb go off. It's time. All right? But anyway, it looks like we've run out of time. I do want to thank you once again for joining me and listening. And I want to invite you to listen again.